All right. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Sit Heads Meditation Club. My name is John. I organize this group. Sit Heads is a sitting and social group for people interested in deep meditation practice. Everything we do is free and donation-based. If you want to hang out with us, you can find us at sit-heads.com. You can find our calendar, sign up for updates, and to find out about events. First, I just want to introduce the wonderful Cedric Reeves. He's a meditation teacher who teaches sort of wisdom-oriented meditation. He has a deep practice in both Buddhist meditation and Advaita Vedanta self-inquiry practice. And he has been focusing in recent years on attachment-oriented psychological work and how that integrates with contemplative practice. So meditations specifically oriented toward repair of early attachment issues. So we're very lucky to have him with us. He came highly recommended by several people in this group. I was specifically asked to hunt him down and drag him here, which I have done. Cedric, I will pass the mic to you. Feel free to say anything you like before we start, and then just go ahead and take us where you want to take us. We're very fortunate to have you. Thanks for being with us.
Well, I'll just say that the being hunted down was a terribly violent process. Anyway, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, y'all. So I figured to just kind of give a little bit of a background on myself, and then we'll kind of get into the content of kind of highlighting some of the stuff that I teach over on the kind of more psychological end of things. And but then we'll go ahead and get into a guided meditation thereafter, and there'll be space for Q&A. Okay, so yeah, I did a lot of meditation for years and years, and it worked. It was helpful, but I think it fixed a lot of the kind of mundane psychological stuff, but it definitely didn't fix all of it. So then about 2 years ago, my friend Evan Lead mentioned attachment theory, ideal parent figure protocol, etc. And that kind of, that really piqued my interest. And the way that he described insecure attachment, I was like, oh, yeah, that's me. And then like a little bit more background around that. I'd been really interested in psychotherapy before getting into meditation. In fact, I was like doing a second undergrad in psychology in order to become a therapist. But then I was exposed to meditation. I'm like, oh my God, this is like way better than psychotherapy. I'm totally ditching this and going to go meditation. And I did that, and it was great. But like I said, it didn't quite fix everything. So yeah, so like over the last 2 years, my primary kind of activity in life has been studying attachment theory. Also, I did some trainings in ideal parent figure protocol. Also very interested in coherence therapy. I also studied schema therapy. And so now what so again, like I kind of teach, wisdom type practices, but I also teach this more what I call attachment repair oriented practices. And that that instruction, that guided meditation draws from attachment theory, ideal parent figure protocol, coherence therapy, and schema therapy. And then I want to make this clear. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist or a counselor. I'm just a meditation teacher. Also, I think that it may well be the case that some of the guided practice that we do will be a bit triggering. So brace yourself for that. Also, feel free to just kind of like step away or maybe not participate. I mean, I do this stuff all the time. It kind of like touches people. People don't seem to have like psychotic breaks with reality or anything, but I just want to be fully disclosing. Okay, great. So I figured to just kind of launch into this kind of overview of how I teach the attachment repair end of things, and then we'll get into the meditation. So here we go. So we have like dysfunctional habit patterns in our lives. In schema therapy, those are called modes. And then the thought is that these kind of negative fixed views are what drive these modes or symptoms or problematic behaviors in our lives. And so these are, again, these like fixed views, beliefs, and they're called schemas in schema therapy. And the thought is that these schemas are just simply emotional learnings, right? But it is important to understand that they're emotional learnings. They're not cognitive learnings. And then also, if we think about like, why is it that we learn? What's special about learning? What's special about memory? Why is it the way it is? And in my mind, it makes sense that it helps us predict the future, right? On those on like, what is it, stock or mutual fund prospectuses, they say past performance is no predictor or no guarantor of future performance, but it's actually the single best predictor, right? So we have these experiences, they kind of create this view of life, and then we kind of predict that life will be the same way. So if we have really negative early experiences, in a sense, we see a negative outcome when actually the data, the raw sense data, shouldn't really predict that. We kind of predict this kind of negative outcome. And so, in a sense, the work, what I teach is all about, well, primarily focused on emotional memory reconsolidation. And I hope that we'll do some of that here shortly in the guidance. So okay, let's give some examples of what are some of these schemas or problematic emotional memories / predictions. So I'll just go over the first 5 attachment schemas from schema therapy. They are abandonment and instability. So the expectation that things are unstable and that you'll be abandoned. Abuse and mistrust. So this kind of fearful posture of expecting abuse and not trusting others' motivations. The third is emotional deprivation, which is the sense that, I'll not be attuned with, I'll not be understood, I'll not be kind of guided and protected. Then the fourth is shame and defectiveness. And I like to think of this as internalized rejection. So when we've had experiences of rejection, we think, especially children, as children, we think, oh, there's something wrong with me. And then the fifth is social isolation and alienation. So like this kind of sense, this belief, this prediction that, oh, I don't fit in. I'm not one of the group. And drawing from schema therapy, there's 18 of these, and you can like kind of construe them more broadly, and there's kind of infinite numbers of them, and they kind of like interlock in different ways. Anyhow, but they're just examples. So, okay, that's all good and well. And so we kind of have a little bit of a sense of the problem. So we have these beliefs, and then due to these beliefs, we kind of manifest in the world in a problematic way. Okay, great. We know what the problem is. But then how do we fix it, right? I mean, this whole group, everybody's interested in practice, right? And me too. So we want to know, how do we fix it? So what we do is we first like kind of develop a curiosity about this. Like, it's like, oh yeah, what are these habit patterns? And then we try to figure out what are the beliefs behind them. And then in order to fix them, we re-experience the belief. So let's just say we re-experience this sense of defectiveness and shame. Like, so we come into this mental state of, there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I anticipate rejection. I should be rejected. So you come into that, and then in this guided meditation, we fabricate through a visualization an emotionally corrective experience. And then when we have an emotionally corrective experience coupled with this old schema, or rather when we have a positive experience that's relevant to this old schema, and they kind of co-arise in time, what that does is, in a sense, very simple, it creates a prediction error. Like, we're like, oh, I thought I would be rejected. I thought that there being something wrong with me would be confirmed. And then what happens is the opposite happens. We are taken in, comforted, soothed, embraced, attuned with, protected. And then again, that causes a prediction error. And that prediction error brings about and I'm not like really a science guy, but like the it opens up for actual brain plasticity, right? It opens up the brain or opens up this memory such that it be reconsolidated and actually updated. Basically, that's the core of it. And now I'll mention that, let me kind of go back to attachment. So the name of my website is Attachment Repair, and I do focus a lot on attachment, but I kind of, the reason, the way that I view attachment interfacing with all of this is the attachment schemas or the attachment experiences are the ones that form the most core schemas, and they're in there kind of like at the earliest level, and so that's why we focus a lot on attachment. But it's just actually incidental because this process of identifying and then reconsolidating emotional memories work with attachment schemas and non-attachment schemas. And again, schemas are just a belief. And then now I realize that I've brought in the word attachment, but I don't think I've defined it. So attachment, one way to think about it is it's just these like your kind of beliefs around, or attachment conditioning is your beliefs around how you interface with others. You know, like your attachment conditioning answers the questions: am I going to be received? Is it safe to connect with others? Am I someone that's wanted, or am I not someone that's wanted? And then kind of as a like subsidiary there too is like, do you have the support to go out and explore, or do you not really have the support to go out and explore? And you can kind of think of the two poles of attachment as connection and exploration. Okay, that's basically the kind of sensitization lecture. What I figured to do now is just start with the meditation. I'm anticipating this to be about 15 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll kind of go through a series of relaxation, just a body scan, and then I'll ask you kind of to find a problem in your life, and then we're going to find the belief that underlies it, kind of bring it up, experience this belief or this schema, and then have an emotionally corrective experience with a perfect nurturer. So now the perfect nurturer, that actually probably bears a little bit of explanation before we launch in. So this perfect nurturer, also, Dan Brown uses language of an ideal parent. And so, kind of a parental figure. It can also be a kind of mythological figure, Jesus, Bodhisattva, Buddha, whatever's compelling. Okay, great. So, but let's go ahead and launch in. All right. So go ahead and sit up straight. Push the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. Let's go ahead and just take a few deep breaths. Go ahead and inhale super, super deep and retain the breath below the navel. And exhale, and extend the length of the exhale. And now once again, inhale very, very deeply and retain the breath below the navel. And now exhale, extending out the exhale. Then one last time, super deep breath in, and then retain below the navel. And now exhale. Okay, good. Now we'll do a brief body scan. Place the attention on the feet, legs, and hips. And now bring your attention to the rising and falling of the abdomen. And now feel the chest expand and contract. And now feel the upper back and shoulders. Now feel the arms and the hands. And as you're doing it, notice this natural relaxation that arises on its own. And now feel the head, neck, and face. And now take a deep, deep breath and feel the body all at once. And now exhale, letting the whole body relax and disperse all at once. Okay, good. And now, before we get into the actual practice, we're going to do a visualization about how the practice will go. So now see yourself meditating, and then see this practice going very, very well. See this tremendous confidence and ease, fluency. See yourself gaining great insights into yourself and into others as well. And also healing. And now, imagine the positive outcomes of that. See yourself moving through the world with greater ease and confidence, noticing how it's easier to connect with others. And now, having your needs met, notice how there's this natural concern for others, but from a place of generosity and security. Now, really feel into that. This is why we're practicing. Okay, good. Now we'll go ahead and start the meditation. So ask yourself, what is a behavior or kind of especially like a habit pattern that keeps coming up in your life that causes you trouble? Here, have a quality of curiosity and interest. Take another minute to find this problematic behavior of yours. And also, if you could name it in some way, name it in a way that's memorable to you. And so imagine that this behavior is going on right now. And see how there's a certain typical set of mental states that arise when you're in this mode or when this symptom is manifesting. The mind has certain habit patterns. See those now. And also notice how the body feels a certain way. And now notice what some of the causal outcomes are. So this getting into this mode or the symptom causes a kind of cascade of effects. What are those? And now see that clearly. And also, no judgment, no harshness, just curiosity. Okay. And now, see how you view yourself a certain way when you're in this behavior. Also, notice how you view the world in a particular way, or you view others in this particular way. And now ask yourself, what belief makes this behavior necessary? And this likely relates to how you see yourself and how you see the world when you're in this mode of behavior. Now again, notice the belief. So this belief is just a learning. You learned this somewhere. Likely this relates to some sort of unmet need sometime earlier in life. So now imagine yourself floating back, likely to childhood, but also possibly to adolescence, or even earlier adulthood, where this belief about self and world was reinforced. And now this is important. It can be a constructed scene. You can just feel into what it likely would have been like and just kind of make an amalgamation of a memory. The actual memory itself doesn't matter. But so come into a scene where the same negative belief about self and world was reinforced. So take a minute with that. Notice where you are, who you're with, what this felt like. It likely doesn't feel very good. Okay, and now imagine a perfect nurturer that comes into the scene and removes you from the scene and takes you somewhere totally safe. And this perfect nurturer totally gets you. They really understand what you've been through. They track your mental states. Also, you can see on their face how they get what you're experiencing. There's some mirroring. They probably lean in, tilt the head, like, oh, what's happening? And of course, they move to soothe you, comfort you in a way that's perfectly calibrated to your needs. So go ahead and imagine that now. That's right, keep going. Just shape and reshape the scene in such a way to get your needs met. And now all the while, notice how the perfect nurturer, it's a total joy for them to be with you and to support you in just this way. And that helps you settle and take in this soothing and care. That's right. Keep going. And they know that this was a hard experience, but it's all over now. And you're with them now. They're totally confident that you're going to move through this just beautifully. But that doesn't deny any upset that you might be experiencing now. Just keep developing the scene. That's right. Keep going. Also, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do your best. That's right. Keep going. Also, maybe you need to say something to the perfect nurturer, or the perfect nurturer says something to you. It helps you understand all of this better. And also, it's very, very clear. None of this was your fault. This was just a kind of crappy learning, a crappy lesson that you learned. But it actually has nothing to do with you, although it had an impact on you. But you're now working through it. Keep going. And now really open up to how things are different now. Open up to how you're getting great care, that you're really seen and known, cared for in just the right way. Now notice how that changes everything. That's right. Keep developing the scene. Okay. And now you and the perfect nurturer go back to this original theme. But in this case, you're really powerful, totally collected, have a tremendous sense of agency, and the perfect nurturer is there supporting you. And now we're going to redo the scene such that this negative learning, this negative experience never actually happened. And so now just redo the scene. And then really reinforce how you're learning a positive lesson and how this old lesson that you learned, this negative one, is no longer relevant. So just reinforce the scene. That's right. And now really reinforce this positive experience. Okay, good. And now imagine that you and the perfect nurturer start floating back to the present. But you look back at this old scene, at this old negative experience, and you see how, yes, it had an impact on you. So you can appreciate that now. But now also recognize or also feel how the mind is very broad and open. And also you see how you've had so many other positive experiences that actually disconfirm this old negative learning. And the scene just fades away more and more. And now you're back at the present moment as a real adult. And now imagine your actual adult life going forward. But here we're going to reinforce this positive learning. So now see yourself moving through your real adult life, but then kind of feel this wind in your sails. Feel this total unconditional support that you have had from the perfect nurturer, and see how that changes everything. Notice how your interpersonal relations are much easier. Develop the details of that scene now. And now turn the mind to your exploration. So this is what you find meaningful in life, personally meaningful. So see yourself doing your explorations. And then once again, notice how, this kind of childlike wonder is restored. That you feel so supported in your explorations. Go ahead and develop that scene now. That's right. Keep going. And now make a deep impression of this. This is what you expect from life going forward. Good. And now we're just going to do 2 more steps before we end the meditation. So now, look back at this old negative learning, this old belief of yours. This belief or this experience, this schema is very common. Many others have had the same difficult experiences as you. And now on the in-breath, reflect on that, on the suffering of others. And on the out-breath, send them peace and well-being. So on the in-breath, reflecting on their suffering. On the out-breath, wishing them well, sending them healing. And now notice a sense of camaraderie and shared experience. And also notice as you go, this sense of understanding. It's like you really know what others have been through. You've been through it yourself. Good. Now dissolve that. And the last step is just simply silently reflect back. What was this like for you? What did you learn? Also, if there's something unclear, you can ask a question. We can get it dealt with after the meditation as well. Okay, good. So now let the meditation go. Count from 5 to 1, and when I get to 1, you'll be awake and present in the room, settled in the experience. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awake and present in the room, settled in the experience. Okay, that's it. So yeah, if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them.
Yes. So I have a bunch of questions, but I guess I'll just ask the thing that came to my mind most recently, which is there a connection between the practice we just did and attachment repair and hypnosis? I just was struck by the counting down and the sort of suggestion component of it.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't like have like an academic understanding of it all, but like, a fair amount of the way I kind of do these guidances are based on like how Dan Brown does his, and like he was hugely influenced by hypnosis and Milton Erickson. So yeah, totally, definitely.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And I mentioned this beforehand, but we both have a shared teacher in Dan Brown. I attended one of his retreats a long, long time ago. Kendall, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Cedric, for that.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering is, well, I actually found it really nice this time in terms of like doing the visualizations. But a lot of times I have trouble like pondering vivid visualizations. Just like some words and like not much vividness when I try to do these kinds of things. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah. I generally just remind people that it's kind of the felt sense of it, and that you're that you're having an emotional experience, and that you kind of understand like what's going on. Like, for example, when you're working on this particular schema, let's say like defectiveness and shame. So you're feeling it, and then that you're having this like corrective experience where it's like there's like you're interacting with this perfect nurturer, and there's nothing wrong with you, and you're just fantastic as you are. And that felt sense of that and understanding the meaning of the scene, like at a kind of emotional level, that's what matters. And the vividness of the like imagination and the scene, etc., is just of instrumental value. It helps, and it's great if it's super vivid, but I don't actually think it matters very much. Is that speaking to your question? Is there more around that?
I think that makes sense. I guess like sometimes both aren't that strong, but like I can see like sometimes I can have like the understanding of the meaning without necessarily the images when it goes well. So
yeah, as far as I know, I think that these kind of visualization practices even work for people that can't like have mental image. They still work. So, and then also, I mean, all of us here are like, serious practitioners, and we practice, right? And we kind of have the sense of like how things improve over time and get more vivid, more clear, more malleable. So yeah. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thanks, Kendall. Thanks, Cedric. Daniel M., you had a question.
Hi, Cedric. Thank you. And thank you, John, and all of you guys for doing this thing. Cedric, that was a really beautiful meditation. And I just started learning a little bit about you through some support group that's like, you guys are going through a schema book. Yeah, and I didn't get to join it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and this journey is really cool that you're going on, and thanks for sharing the gifts of it. But I guess the question I have in your research on attachment is, there's something about today. I was thinking about when we imagine those characters, the voice, the tone, their behavior. Sometimes I think about maybe we learn those things through interpersonally. So is there some attachment research that talks about that, like that we need to do these practices interpersonally so that we can kind of hear that voice, and maybe be around safe people to like, it's almost like you're already getting the benefits of a secure attachment by starting doing it with others.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, like to be clear, you can okay, so kind of look like we'll kind of step way back, and let's go back to kind of this like emotional learning, emotional beliefs, right? And like I'll just say that I think, for example, most talk therapy is not really good at like addressing these kind of really deeply held, especially attachment schemas, right? Because you're just like talking about it, and it's kind of at an intellectual level. So what we actually need to have is an emotionally corrective experience. And then to be clear, what's fantastic about these meditations is literally we can fabricate them. We hallucinate them. It's like, imagine perfect nurturer. They're saying that, you're great. And boom, you just hallucinate it. However, it entirely works if you can find somebody who's like, has secure attachment, who is, healthy, and for whom, and then just y'all happen to have a really good relationship. And then what's happening is like you have, actually real healing can happen by you're predicting like this bad, like maybe you're vulnerable, you let the person know, oh, there's this terrible thing about me, I'm terribly ashamed of it. Like, that person just responds like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, it's okay, yeah, it's no problem. And then like, actually you can have memory reconsolidation with that. It's like, huh, what? No, damn it, you're supposed to reject me. But no, they didn't. And then now you have to actually adjust your model of reality. And that is, in my mind, how you bring about transformational change through memory reconsolidation. Is that speaking to your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And it almost it's almost like both are true, that you're bringing that inside and through those relationships, and you can do
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for your work. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you, Daniel. And thanks, Cedric. Caroline, go ahead.
Hey, Cedric. Thanks for being here tonight.
Uh-huh.
This was really great, and I, took it kind of seriously in terms of like I didn't want to go too deep into anything,
Sure.
tonight, and so the thing I struggle with in my life, I sort of picked a very surface level thing, and then going into it, it took me somewhere I didn't expect, and it was very like it took me to this memory that I had not connected to this thing to this habit that I have, and I was just sort of wondering, is that a normal thing? And then I also had questions about like, am I doing this right? Maybe similar to Kendall, of like, I'm not sure that I was visualizing certain things the right way.
Okay. So based on what very little I know about your practice so far, it seems fine. I suspect you're doing it right. Also, I find these practices are very forgiving. Like you can really screw up most of it, and it seems to work out just fine anyway. And then your report about like, oh, again, I pulled on this one little thread, and then, but it's like I came out here, and this was like some major thing. Yeah, that seems completely normal and actually kind of positive. It seems like you manage to emotionally regulate around it. I mean, you're not crying and yelling right now. So, you seem to have like kind of come through it all right. And so it seems like it was, it's a good report. So am I speaking to your question? Is there more around that?
Yeah, yes, you did. And I thought it was interesting for me that, the healing figure that showed up for me ended up being myself, which was also just like, oh, well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, well, also using like in schema therapy, what they do is in these scenes, they use your best healthy adult self, and that healthy adult reparents you. So it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, the verbiage that Daniel Brown uses, ideal parent, ideal mom, ideal father, etc. But it can kind of be anybody. You generally don't want it to be your parents or anybody that you kind of really know personally that's like fallible, because like, oh, mom wouldn't get this. Oh, I'd forget it. Nah, don't worry about it. No, you want somebody that's like kind of like idealizable, but outside of that, it kind of doesn't matter the person you use, and an ideal version of yourself is perfectly fine.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Cedric. So I'm wondering, what's the intersection that you've seen between these sort of attachment repair practices and more traditional meditation practice? Does one benefit the other? Do they both benefit each other? Are you likelier to have sort of success with these practices, or does it strengthen the emotional memory reconsolidation if you have already developed, for instance, concentration, and things of that nature? What have you observed there?
Okay, so just asking about like how, like, let's say traditional meditation and then these kind of practices, how they come together and influence each other, etc. Yeah, so I think that like, it's funny, like, so I'm trolling the internet trying to get people to take my classes and stuff, and I totally like meditators and then IFS people, because those people are they like have this like intellectual bucket for, it's like, oh yeah, work, practice, like I'll do this by myself and not like only come to like a, you know, like a therapist or come to like this person and then have them do it for me. They like have like, oh yeah, I'm gonna work.
And just for folks who don't know, IFS is internal family systems, right?
Yep. Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I think that first off, if you are a practitioner, then doing these practices is easier. And certainly like, you know, concentration, sensory clarity, equanimity, like using, you know, Shinzen Young's language, if that's developed, it's easier. And now like, you know, these are visualization practices. And I think Dan Brown, the way he developed his system, it was also influenced by, I mean, he was, in the system that he created was influenced by attachment theory, by Ericksonian hypnosis, and by you know, Tibetan or Vajrayana deity practice. So this is meditation, and then also kind of how they support each other. So the way that Dan Brown talks about his system, and what I teach is influence, but it's different. But he talks about it being equivalent to, like, if you do a full course of this and kind of really work, like clean up your attachment conditioning, and then also move on post-attachment conditioning and keep working. The way he views it is it's like a Western equivalent of doing Nundro. Nundro means the preliminary practices in Tibetan Buddhism, which is about, when I like, I've taken Nundro, I haven't finished it, but like it's about 1,700 hours of mostly visualization practices that are really a lot about like just opening up the heart and like developing, you know, the ability to love, developing devotion, etc. And then those kind of practices really do help people work through all this kind of more mundane stuff. So the idea is that, you know, you go to the mundane level of the mind, you fix all that stuff, you know, pretty good, not 100%. And then, you know, it's just a lot easier to go deeper with meditation. And then also, you know how, I mean, probably most of us around here have been around long enough to know that there are people who legit, well, at least in my view, like these people are awake. They have like, you know, have had deep experiences and their ethical problems and they're kind of jerks and all that. So, you know, it kind of can really help to get that stuff cleaned up first, and then you go and do the deep stuff. And then also probably most of us have, you know, been on a retreat and had like really crappy experiences, like really tough kind of purifications happen. And so it's my understanding that if you do this work, that stuff, you know, it'll happen, but it just is not like kind of like psychotic level. It's just a lot more manageable. So that's kind of what's coming up just off the cuff. Yeah, but is there any more around that? So it's a great question.
Oh no, that's very helpful. It is interesting, and I suppose it makes sense that it would sort of, the arrow would go in both directions. That doing one of these would help the other in both directions. That makes a ton of sense to me. And it also makes sense to me that that, of course, knowing Dan Brown's background, that he's so steeped in Tibetan Buddhism, that he'd be influenced by that. But also, as soon as you say it, you can see it, right? It's very much, and the mention of Nundro and the preliminary practices, right? Like for folks who don't know, there are traditionally four, in most systems, there are sort of four Nundro practices. And one of them is sort of a purification practice where this idealized Buddha figure of purification sort of blesses you and purifies you. And Guru Yoga is one of the four, isn't it?
Oh, sure.
And that's another very similar thing where this idealized teacher figure blesses you. So the connections, it's very clear. That's so interesting. And thank you for sort of drawing that connection. Someone sent me a message asking if you wouldn't mind briefly explaining what is IFS, or internal family systems, for people who aren't familiar.
I really don't know much about it. I mean, it's all about part work. I've not studied it. I think it's great. It's like supposedly really effective, but I don't know much about it.
But is it a therapeutic modality?
Okay, IFS or IPF?
IFS.
It's a therapeutic modality developed by Richard Schwartz. And it just helps people kind of work through their problems. And it's this whole like parts model, which is like really popular and very effective. I mean, I strongly recommend people do it. I've just not studied it.
Got it. Yeah, someone was just curious. They weren't familiar with the term. All right, excellent. So Eve, would you like to ask your question?
All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Hey.
I'm so glad
Sure.
that you were able to come
Sure.
to the group. And it's very interesting for me to do the practice in this with this, even though I'm still at home because I'm on Zoom. So I'm home anyway,
right.
But it's different doing it with this group of people versus in one of the other classes. So I thought that was fascinating. And my question was, I was curious about how did you, because the Tong Glen that comes in towards the end, like even more so today than other days, it felt really satisfying and peaceful and helpful for me. And I wondered, how did you discover it? How did you decide to kind of bring it into the attachment repair work?
Sure.
So that I find that really helpful, and I was curious to hear more about it.
Okay, sure. And then I'll just make a clarifying note that the Tonglen is like it means exchange in Tibetan, or like taking and sending is how it's typically translated, and is what we did. It's like the penultimate step. It's like when we reflect, it's like, oh yeah, this suffering, so many others have it as well, have experienced the same thing. Oh, there's a sense of camaraderie. And then you're developing compassion towards others that have experienced this, etc. So how did I like maybe why, and like why do I integrate it in? How did it come about, etc. Geez, okay. So you know, in Dan Brown's system, one thing that he says is that there are 5 core factors for supporting secure attachment: safety, attunement, like, you know, making sure the other person feels seen and known, soothing, comfort, express delight, and support for explorations. And so compassion implies the 2 and 3, certainly, right? Like it implies attunement and understanding the suffering of others, and then, you know, support and comfort. Like when you are in a mental state of compassion, you want to help, right? So that was just something that kind of clicked for me. I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. And then also, and then I didn't really get into it, but I also teach like the importance of metacognitive skills, and we develop better metacognitive skills. And so I also think that this kind of compassion Tonglen piece helps with metacognition, right? Like one aspect of metacognition that I think is very important is what's called decentration. It's like, it's not all about me. And like, yes, everybody really is special in some ways, and in some ways we're not special at all. And I don't think we want to feel, we don't want to feel especially screwed up, right? We don't want to feel special in the way that we're screwed up. And so by like reflecting, it's like, oh, this is so common. So many others experience this as well. And then like by like sending them compassion, you decentrate, right? And in a very healthy way. And then the other thing is that with metacognitive skills is like, in my mind, like I think like a shorthand for good mentalization or metacognition is broadness of view. And so when you step back, he's like, so many others have experienced this, like may they be well, etc. Then that also opens up the mind and lets you take this perspective that I think is very helpful for healing, because it's like you need to understand that like this is just some shit that happened to you. It's like not a big deal. Like it's just unfortunate it happened, but then there's so much else, and you're not alone in this. And then, you know, you're reminded to take this broad view. And let me think if there's another reason. Also, another piece around the metacognition is that one aspect of metacognition is mastery. And so in a certain way, like what is the, at least Mahayana and Vajrayana answer to suffering? It is compassion. Like, and then said another way, like the first, I don't know if y'all have heard of the 4 Noble Truths being turned around into like the 4 Noble Tasks. I like that better because I'm not into like truths and polemics like that. I'm interested in like practice and tasks. And so I think of the first noble task as to like look at suffering, see it as it is, see the messiness of life, and have a posture of openness towards it. And to be open and receptive and to see suffering as it is compassion. And so once again, just to bring in, so by bringing in the compassionate piece, we actually also work on mastery. And in this case, mastery means greeting suffering with compassion. And then let me just think if there's another reason that I brought it in. Nope, that's all I can think of. Anything else around that, Eve?
No, that was very helpful. Thank you for talking that through.
Great, sure, my pleasure.
Thanks, Eve. Thanks, Cedric. I have here a request for a second question / comment from Daniel.
Thank you. Sorry, I hope it's not too much. I appreciate again all the answers so far. I'm taking notes
No
here.
problem.
Just something that came up. It's almost a commentary, but there's a Mark Epstein. You might be familiar. He's a therapist and he studies Buddhism. He's written some books, but I think one of his books he talks about attachment and the trauma of everyday life, and he kind of like speculates about Buddha being born. You know, his mom dying when he was born and everything. I'm wondering, is that I only heard like in passing, but I'm wondering if that was something that you've heard other talk when it comes to attachment, mindfulness, the development of that stuff, or just maybe.
No, I mean, I know of the story, but I never thought about it. And certainly if someone's mother dies, I mean, like I think surely in 99% of cases that would be developmentally traumatic. So slash attachment wounding. I mean, 100%, totally. Yep. So, and maybe it's a case that, I mean, first off, well, let me not go there. But like one thing about, I mean, certainly it could make sense that the Buddha experienced kind of a intractable suffering that kind of just drove him, and that he, kind of obsessively did some work that seemed to yield fruit. So that's something that comes up. Like, I mean, I know that in my own case, I wouldn't be so obsessive about this if I hadn't been trying to work through a bunch of suffering.
Sure. Right. And then gifts, and then you have gifts. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to take any more questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Daniel. And thank you, Cedric. When we did the guided practice, you asked us to just sort of identify a habit pattern, right? One that's caused us challenges or is problematic in some way. Is the assumption that all those sorts of problematic habit patterns have some basis in early attachment issues? And if not, would this be effective for habit patterns that don't stem from that? Or is this only from patterns that come from sort of early trauma and attachment issues?
Yeah, I think no, like this is effective for any kind of like schema, like emotional kind of memory. And in my kind of just instinctive sense around it, like most people's problems, I think if you had all the neurosis in the world, I would guess that, maybe 65, 80% of it would go back in a kind of core way to the attachment phase. And then, this is where like, your model for the world is developed, right? Like your model for self, relationships, whether you can explore, how well you can do emotional self-regulation, all that's established in that period. But no, definitely there are kind of like, conditioning imprints that are completely non-attachment and then technically, attachment kind of conditioning can happen in the attachment phase, like between like 6 months and 3 years, or post, you can still have like an attachment impressions, but they tend to not be as deep. But yeah, this works for any emotional memory.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for clarifying that. That's interesting, because the one that I chose, I realized I was trying to think back, and I realized that I think this first emerged in college. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
Maybe, I mean, who knows? Maybe it was submerged until college, but it developed.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows? But I just wasn't sure. I was like, well, should I find one that is more obviously a childhood linked issue? So it's clarifying to know that that's not necessary.
Yeah. Well, let me make another follow-up comment on that. So
yeah.
What's also interesting is like, so we're working, like we really want to work on the schema and not the memory. And now schema and memory are very similar, but how to put this? What's interesting is, like, you know, like think about memory, like what is memory? It's actually just this hallucination that's arising right now. And we don't have any proof that it has anything to do with our past. Not really. I mean, you know, we could, you know, that's one perspective, right? But so the thing is that memory just arises as this, like, I'll call it hallucination now. And then if it seems to have this emotional relevance, then fine, work on it. Because you're kind of reconstructing it constantly anyway. So that I don't really even think that there's like, I mean, to be clear, we're like the language that we're using is like, go back to childhood. Like, there's no going back to childhood. You didn't leave the room that you're in the whole time. You know what I'm saying? We were just here.
Touche.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting perspective. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I think we might be at the end of the questions, which is perfect because we're almost at our stopping time. So first, I just want to say, thank you for joining us, sharing this interesting practice, which I was not previously familiar with, and I'm glad to be now a little bit more familiar. So I really appreciate that. So Cedric, do you want to say any final things before we say goodnight?
No, I can't think of much. I mean, it's been a pleasure. You know, thank you very much, John.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Go find Cedric at attachmentrepair.com. All right, everybody, have a good night. Take care.